Fire. So go ahead and what's your name and what do you do and why are we here?
Okay. I'm Nathan Winograd. I am the Executive Director of the National No Kill Advocacy Center, which has a singular mission. We want to end the systematic killing of companion animals in shelters across the United States. And I'm in Lansing, Michigan at the Michigan No Kill Conference to share with animal rescuers and with shelter directors and just concerned animal lovers the good news of the incredible progress we're making across the country to create no-kill communities and what that means for their own communities. What it was really exciting was learning that there are 10 communities across Michigan that have ended the killing of healthy and treatable animals in shelters, which is more communities than any other state in the country, and it's numbers that we expect to see grow over time until Michigan, like the rest of the nation, completely and forever ends the killing of dogs and cats and rabbits and other animals in its shelters.
Nathan, how long have you been involved with the animal business from the beginning?
Well, I mean, I'm the son of one of the original cat ladies, and so I've always been involved in rescuing animals. In fact, when my sister went off to college, she started taking care of the neighborhood stray cats, and when I went off to college, I started taking care of the cats. I thought that's just what people did. You leave home and you find the cats that need help and you help them. But I really, in earnest, dedicated my life to saving companion animals, particularly those being killed by shelters. When I became a law student, at the time there were about 500 feline campus residents, 500 cats that made their home on the Stanford University campus, and there was a group there called faculty, students, and staff, which I fell in with, called the Stanford Cat Network. There was a time when the Stanford administration had made the decision that they were going to round up and kill all the cats, and the cat lovers on campus, fought for their lives, and in their naivety, they turned to the local Humane Society, which was the Humane Society of Santa Clara Valley, which did animal control for the county in which Stanford makes its home, thinking that the Humane Society would want to help them save the cats, but unfortunately, the Humane Society sided with the university and said that the cats should be brought to them, and because they were unsocial and didn't like to be around people, that they should be killed. And of course, if you're a cat lover, and especially if you're a cat lover who every day feeds and provides fresh water and has built shelters and daily watches over these cats, that's not really a humane choice. And so again, in their naivety, they turned to the nation's largest and at the time arguably most powerful humane organization in the country, the Humane Society of the United States, thinking that saving the lives of these cats would be within the humane mission of the Humane Society of the United States. But unfortunately, they too sided with the Humane Society, the local Humane Society, which sided with the university. But the cat lovers fought back, and they eventually won, and the Stanford Cat Network was born, and all those cats were allowed to live out their lives. For me, that was really my wake-up call to what the reality was like for the millions of animals who entered shelters every year. I literally naively thought that humane societies and SPCAs were shelters in the truest sense of the words, a safe haven, a place where animals found a new beginning instead of what I learned that they actually faced, which was the end of the line. And I resolved then and there to dedicate my life to changing that.
What year was that?
That was in the mid-1990s or early 1990s. The good news is since that time, at the time there wasn't a single no-kill community in the United States. But you know, it was one of those things where you dare to dream. You know, what if you ran a shelter that saved all the animals? Why couldn't we do that? You know, the good news is that I was able to get a job as a director eventually at a shelter, at an animal control municipal shelter, and we did create the first no-kill community in the United States in Tompkins County, New York. And then when I left there, I decided I was going to spend the rest of my time teaching other shelters, one, how we did it, and two, why they could do it too. And today we have 200 cities and counties, 200 cities and towns across the country, about 54 different counties that have ended the killing of savable animals in their shelters, and they have returned the term euthanasia to its dictionary definition, and essentially what it was meant to be from the beginning.
Now, what kind of experience did you have? What were you going to school for? Were you studying to get involved with this stuff and kind of changed how things worked, or?
No, you know, I graduated, I got an undergraduate degree in political science with a minor in American colonial history, which basically meant that I was unemployable, and so I decided to go to law school. And, you know, while at law school, one day I was living in the law school dorms, and I heard this woman outside my dorm room window calling out to cats. I mean, you know, in that baby voice that we all adopt when we see these cute little guys, you know, she's going, "Here, kitty, kitty, kitty," and I looked out the window and saw all these little guys coming out of the woodwork. And so I went downstairs to talk to her, and of course at first she perceived me as a threat, but I told her that I was a cat lover, and that you know, I grew up with cats and I love cats and have rescued cats. And she started telling me about the Stanford Cat Network and what their history was and the work that they did. And you know, while my colleagues in law school were trying to go out for law review and trying to get big corporate jobs, I decided that I was going to focus my life on saving cats and dogs and rabbits and hamsters and gerbils and all the other animals that end up in shelters. And the rest, as they say, is history.
How many people told you were nuts when you were starting to make this shift? How can you think about, you know, nobody makes any money doing this?
Actually, you know, what was really ironic was my dad, who simply did not understand how I could make a living. And, you know, admittedly, I don't make much of a living if we're looking at paychecks. But, you know, he said, "Why would dogs and cats need a lawyer?" And I would say to him, in fact, I'm going to be the only lawyer on earth whose clients are all innocent. And, you know, and my father-in-law used to, you know, rib me that I was the only person that he ever met whose goal in life seemed to be a smaller and smaller office and a smaller and smaller paycheck. But I am incredibly passionate about this. I'm incredibly gratified at the progress that we've made as a movement, and it is really exciting for me to not just see the fruits of all that labor in terms of the number of animals who would have been killed in years past, who are, you know, instead of going out the back door in body bags, they're now increasingly going out the front door in the loving arms of families. And even here in Michigan, when I talked to shelter directors who said that they read my book and it changed everything for them. And you know, they used to do things one way, which resulted in a lot of dead animals, and now they're doing things a new, innovative way. And all the animals that they would have killed in years past are now being saved. I mean, that is so incredibly gratifying. And while it does mean that I eat at restaurants a lot less than most people, and while it does mean that I drive an old car rather than a fancy new one, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, it would be nice to make a little bit of money, but I wouldn't trade my life for anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of pinpoint when? I mean, you pinpointed when it shifted for you, but when was the moment that you kind of became the godfather of the movement? What happened? Was there a book? Was there speaking engagements? Was there some event that took place? Because all of a sudden, at some point in time, it turned over that, hey, we need to get Nathan Winograd's take on this, because he's pushing the no-kill. I mean, this whole current movement right now is heavily attributed to your work.
So I was working at a private SPCA in San Francisco, which at the time was the most successful shelter and the most successful community in the country. I mean, if you were a homeless dog or cat, you know, San Francisco in the mid-1990s was the place to be. But it wasn't a no-kill community. And I got the opportunity to take over an animal control shelter in upstate New York and take what I thought was possible from the theoretical to the real. But I actually didn't know how long it would take to do that. You know, how long would it take to take a poorly performing high kill shelter with a staff that blamed the public, that never saw the killing as their own failure to think outside the box, or their willingness to take risks and try new things. How long would it take to take that model and create a no-kill community at an animal control shelter where the doors are always open? And I remember when I pulled into the parking lot my first day, we had not opened yet that morning, and there was somebody in the parking lot with a box of kittens that his cat had because he didn't spay his cat, and you know, the kittens weren't his problem, they were going to be our problem. And I remember literally that's what greeted as I pulled into the parking lot my first day, and I remember thinking, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? But we saved every one of those kittens, and on my second day, as the cages were full and somebody brought in a litter of puppies, one of my staff members turned to me and said, "Who are you going to kill to make room for this litter of puppies?" And I said to them, "What's plan B?" And they said, "We don't have one. This is the way we've always done it." So I called a staff meeting and I said to them, "Look, you know, I didn't drive 3,000 miles from San Francisco to upstate New York to kill animals, and I certainly am not going to sign a paycheck to a staff who throws up their hands and says there's nothing we can do and is asking me to put to death these beautiful, chubby, you know, puppies who have their whole lives ahead of them. So unless somebody's going to come up with a plan B, what I'm going to do is use the paycheck that I pay you, and I'm going to board these puppies at a local boarding kennel until I can figure out what to do with them." And all of a sudden, the creative juices started flowing. And I didn't mean to be that harsh, and I didn't start out being that harsh, but you know, they were asking me to do something that custom had reconciled them to, but I saw as the most extreme and the most violent of all possible responses, and that's put them to death. So we weren't even going to have the conversation whether killing was the first resort, you know, when the cages get full, or the last resort when we run out of options. It was going to be no resort. And when you take killing off the table, then you become incredibly creative, and that's what we did. And since we were a rural shelter, we had these metal horse troughs. And we brought them out, and we filled them with shredded paper, and we put them in the lobby, and we put the puppies in there. And you know, what better way to showcase these beautiful little gems? Everybody who entered the shelter had to walk by them, and they got much needed socialization, and they were all adopted very, very quickly. And from, you know, that single act of creativity where we took killing off the table sparked a revolution in our community, and virtually overnight, you know, Tompkins County, New York became the first no-kill community in U.S. history. And it's that same can-do, imaginative, creative attitude that has helped create now no-kill communities all over the country, you know, in urban communities, in rural ones, in public shelters, in private shelters, in northern communities, in southern ones, in the most liberal of liberal communities, and in the reddest parts of the reddest states. And so I decided I was going to write a book about my experiences and how we ended the killing in upstate New York, and how other communities can too, and that was redemption. And I remember going around the country and thinking, how is this going to be received? You know, people who have been invested in this paradigm of killing, who have killed, you know, hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of animals, how are they going to take being told that not only is what they did wrong, but it was completely unnecessary? And how are rescuers going to accept this? And it was incredible. And I remember the crowd started out fairly large, and they got bigger, and the momentum has just been increasing ever since. And we now have a full-fledged revolution occurring all across the country. And we are now the dominant voice in animal sheltering, and even the large organizations that told us what we were doing was impossible, and that it was smoke and mirrors, and it was a hoax, and it could never happen, are now feeling incredible pressure because they see that this is a wildfire that is burning in every community across the country, and it will not end until we literally burn down every last vestige of the catch and kill paradigm that has dominated this country since the 19th century.
We'll come back to that, but I want to, let me shift again here real quick. I just came back from the first International Conference on Dog Population Management in New York, and I had an opportunity to interview a host of different people, including Dr. Andrew Rowan from HSI and others. And I'll come back to you in just a second on the other camera. I'm going to get a profile. Go ahead and take a peek at the other camera.
Okay.
That way I can get you in profile here. Oh, see, that's good. Oh my God. And I turned record on, Nathan.
There you go.
Means we're actually going to have something. But while I was there, I had an opportunity to interact with many people that have been dealing with all kinds of issues, whether it's rabies or, all these different dog population issues. And there's 400 to 700 million, and so many get put down here, and there's 55,000 people that die of rabies every year, and all this stuff. But then I also started to focus on those organizations that were doing something that we see that not too many are doing, and that is counting the animals, actually going right to the very beginning. Because most people are looking at the back end. They're looking at the end of the river and saying, euthanization is this, so this means there's this many animals, and this is where they come from. But one of the things that was interesting to me that came up was from a study in Sao Paulo. Again, a university study, so I'm gonna go back to your cat issue on the campus there. And one of the things that they determined in this census and study in this very controlled environment, the university environment, even though there's comings and goings, and they had a stray dog population, was this issue of equilibrium, that if the materials are there for animals to be there, and if you take out the existing animals that are there, others will just simply come to take their place. What do you know about this thing of equilibrium? So if we take all of these animals off the street, that they're just going to be filled in by all these other animals?
Well, I'm not an expert in that area, and what has made our movement, the No Kill movement, which is just one slice of the animal welfare, animal rights movement, by focusing on this very specific problem. Can we end the killing of animals who end up in shelters? We've been incredibly successful because we've been able to penetrate a very specific problem very, very deeply. And I think, so we're acting, I guess it's sort of an offshoot of the old 1970s environmental slogan, act locally, impact globally. So we're acting in this very specific area. We see this incredible harm in the killing of, at least in the United States, roughly 4 million animals every year. And we are working to solve that problem. And in fact, in hundreds of communities, cities and towns across America, we have solved the problem, and the number is going to continue to grow. So for the No Kill movement, we are the generation that questioned the killing. We're the generation that figured out how to stop it, and we're going to be the generation that does. And that makes us one of the most successful movements in animal rights and animal welfare today. And if we can solve this problem, the hope is that it will inspire others, regardless of whether their focus is on on sheltering as ours is, or something else, you know, animals raised and killed for food, or animals in laboratories, or animals, wildlife on the streets, and all those, in our urban communities, all those different problems, I think we can make an important contribution by showing people that by being creative and imaginative, we can find solutions, that we're not stuck with what, I think a lot of us end up doing, because we're in the trenches and we can get pessimistic and myopic, and we end up doing a lot of hand-wringing rather than a lot of imaginative thinking and problem solving. But there's another aspect too. People in this country, in the United States, we are really a dog and cat loving nation. You know, when you look at all the demographics, they are incredibly, incredibly uplifting. Even though our country has been struggling with an economic downturn, if you look at how much people spend on their own companion animals, that continued to go up every year, even in the height of the Great Recession. And so now that, now it's topped $50 billion to become the 8th largest sector of our economy. And not only are we spending $50 billion on our own animals, we are giving hundreds of millions of dollars more to charities who care for animals in need, so that giving to animal-related causes has become the fastest growing segment in American philanthropy. And I think it's people's love of their dogs and cats that with the right information and over time and exposure to these larger animal rights and animal welfare issues, that will get people thinking about these larger issues. So if we can solve the problem, which we will, of shelter killing, and we give dogs and cats and other companion animals a right to live, that will create incredibly powerful social and legal precedents that can be brought to bear to help animals in a wide variety of contexts, and combined with people's understanding that this little critter that they share their home with is capable of great love and great joy and even great suffering, that over time, and again with the right information, they'll start thinking very deeply and very compassionately about animals in laboratories and animals on factory farms, and the need to peacefully coexist with wildlife and all those other issues that I believe that at the end of the day, that people are we're a very kind and decent species, and the history of the human race is a history of overcoming our darker natures. And if you give people the tools, if you give them the information, if you create a path in front of them, the vast majority will follow you into that brighter future.
Yeah, the reason I brought that up is because that culling seems to be a response to issues, whether it's currently like the badger cull that's going on in the UK right now because they're concerned about bovine TB, and the badgers are kind of the link, and they're going to be culling 90 to 120. And here's where I was going to come to next, was the whole fact that you're somewhat of a pariah with a whole list of other shelter groups that absolutely are terrified of what it is that you're communicating, or what they expect that they're going to have to do, and so on. And so I wanted to ask that equilibrium issue, because what happens with, and what they found in the study was they decided not to cull in Sao Paulo, because if they had taken them out, then they would have had a bunch of dogs introduced that they were unfamiliar with. They were familiar with the ones that were there. And so the unfamiliarity and the new ones that would come in caused a greater hazard than to let the ones that were still there be there instead of culling them. So, but what happens if there is no culling, in essence, down of any of the dog population through this process that you're talking about? What is there at some point in time a stoppage of how many animals are coming into the pipeline? That's the big issue, or the pushback that I hear from people that are anti-no-kill movement, saying, oh, it's bullshit, can't be, there's just going to be more animals, and they're just going to stack up in crates in the corner.
Okay, well, I mean, so, it's hard to take an argument seriously when they say something's impossible, that not only has been achieved, but it's been achieved in hundreds of cities and towns across the country. And now, some of them are relatively new no-kill communities, but some of them have been no-kill for over a decade. And you know, when I was running an open admission animal control shelter, our average length of stay was only 8 days. So it wasn't that the animals were piling up and being stuck in crates for years. In fact, they were moving very quickly in the shelter, through the shelter, and out of the shelter into the loving new homes that was their birthright. And the bottom line for me is, look, there are a lot of reasons why this works, and there are a lot of good reasons to do it, and there are a lot of practical reasons why you don't need to kill. But the most important reason is this, and that is killing a healthy and treatable animal, regardless of the justification, is never an act of love. It is an act of violence. And as soon as we take that off the table, it is only the most pessimistic and the most failure-minded of people who think that all we're going to do as humans who are capable of great things is throw up our hands, say there's nothing we can do, and let them pile up and get sick and die and crates. And that's not been the experience of the no-kill movement. And I would argue to you that it's not even sincere, you know, in the face of this life-affirming, in the face of the cure for the disease of shelter killing, some shelter directors who were still killing the bulk of their occupants had to answer the question by animal lovers in their community, if they can do it in these other places, why can't we do it here? And for the first time, this movement has held shelter directors accountable. You know, historically, all they had to do was say there's too many animals, not enough homes, or it's the irresponsible public's fault, and they can continue to fail time and time and time again, and nobody held them accountable. Nobody said you're not getting the job done. Nobody asked them how many animals they were saving versus killing. And we're starting to ask those questions. In fact, we're asking them more and more. And I think for a movement that has had a free ride since the 19th century, asking them to take responsibility has been an eye-opener for them, and has forced some of them, or caused some of them, not forced, but caused some of them to fight back. I mean, the bottom line is that all the justifications used to kill animals have all been proven false. All the dogmas of this movement, you know, like just the simple one of, you know, there's too many animals and not enough homes. If you were to ask shelter directors still killing the bulk of the animals in their shelters, okay, so you're arguing that there is this supply-demand imbalance. What is the supply? They can tell you that, and that's the number of animals that they kill every year. What is the demand for animals? I mean, if you're going to argue a supply-demand imbalance, too many animals, not enough homes, you need to know the demand side of the question. And nobody thought to ask that. And when we started looking at it around the country, we knew about 4 million animals are killed in shelters every year. Now, if you look
Now, I've heard numbers, again, this is a famous thing for the animal advocacy movement, because the animals can't speak for themselves. And ever since Katrina, you know, I've watched numbers. And people have different justifications of, hey, it's okay to inflate numbers because the worst thing that can happen and so on. But I've heard that number, at least in the U.S., is anywhere from 4 to 16 million. Your 4 million is actually very much on the low side.
But it's a rigorous number. I mean, it's based on a database of 1,100 shelters, which is about a third of the total. It is based on state reporting requirements. So there are a number of states like Michigan and California and Connecticut and North Carolina that do state reporting, so we know how many animals are dying in those shelters in those states, and it's based on studies that were done by several organizations, and all those numbers were compared and contrasted, and it is a pretty rigorous number. And in fact, you know, if you look at this movement, there are so many things that we disagree about, but at least the major nonprofit animal welfare welfare organizations and those advocating for the implementation of the no-kill philosophy agree that the number of dogs and cats and other companion animals being killed in shelters is at its lowest level it has ever been, and it's right around 3.75 million to 4 million dogs and cats. But of those, about 3 million are being killed because of lack of a home. And the question is, can we find homes for 3 million animals a year? And even the data there is even more optimistic because every year in the United States, there's roughly 23.5 million people that add a new animal to their home. Now, the reality is some of those are already committed to adopting from a shelter. Those are the ones that are currently being saved. And the reality is, whether we like it or not, whether we think it's a good idea or not, that some of those people are already committed to buying from a breeder or another commercial source. But what we found is that about 17 million people have not decided where they're going to get their next animal from. And surveys show that they can be influenced to adopt from a shelter. And so the challenge isn't about too many animals, not enough homes. The challenge is one of market share. We need to do a better job marketing our animals, and we need to keep the animals alive long enough so that they can make it into those homes.
Well, that's fascinating that you're one of the first organizations that has, in essence, undersold a number. And it seems like because you're very interested in the integrity of what it is that you're putting out there, as opposed to getting everybody excited about some overblown number. Oh, there's millions and millions and millions. So I'm fascinated in the fact that you want to really focus on the facts of what's taking place here in general.
It's a great comment, because I think what has hampered the success of this movement is that we have relied a lot on intuition, which can be wrong. We have relied a lot on dogma, which can hamstring us. We have relied on gut feel, and we've relied on things that we've heard over and over and over, and nobody ever thought to question the source. In fact, it was almost like a religion, these things that we accept without question as articles of faith. And then when we started asking the questions, well, how do we know there are too many animals, not enough homes? And there's good reasons to ask those questions, because, for example, if you look at puppy mills and pet stores, puppy mills aren't in the business of selling dogs because they love dogs. I mean, far from it. There's rampant neglect and abuse in puppy mills, and it's about making money. And they wouldn't be making money if there weren't homes available. So just on the basis of that, we know that there are homes out there. The problem wasn't a lack of homes. The problem was they weren't adopting from the shelter. They were going to these other places, and so we started asking the question, well, how many homes are there every year? And not just new homes where people don't have a dog or don't have a cat or don't have a rabbit or don't have a hamster and are going to get one, but people who already have an animal and decide they're going to get another one. So we're talking about expanding markets, new markets, and also replacement markets. I mean, animals are mortal, and they die, and they, sometimes the gardener leaves the gate open, and they escape and run away, and or get lost, I should say. And so we've got new markets, we've got expanding markets, and we've got replacement markets. And when you start to do the analysis and start looking at the data, and not just the data, but when you start looking at experience, I mean, there are communities that have per capita intake rates 10 times that of New York City, 20 times that of New York City, that are now no-kill. How did they do it if there was pet overpopulation or not enough homes? How were they able to adopt their way out of killing? And they did it, and they're continuing to do it. So we've got the data that proves it's possible. We've got the experience of no-kill communities now for better than a decade that prove it's possible. And more communities are coming online and joining the movement and becoming no-kill all the time. So it's a growing movement, and all those things fly in the face of this 19th century unethical, violent philosophy that said the best we can do for homeless animals is to adopt the precious few and kill the rest.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated. I appreciate you kind of bringing up, and it's a good segue, because I wanted to go into the next segment, and I believe the animal rights movement is the most substantial rights movement going on right now. You know, it's the next big thing. And so everybody wants to get involved with it. Is there such a thing as too many rescues and too many shelters and too many fosters? Can there be too many people? Does it you know, we have hoarders that come out of those situations. I mean, should people be regulated? Should they be required to take some kind of test or something? It seems right now that every time a new rescue starts up, someone has a falling out, they go start their own. So it's like, I tell two friends, they tell two friends, and right now, since Hurricane Katrina and social media, there's been this absolute explosion. 10,000 plus registered in the U.S. alone just a couple of years ago. I know that number keeps growing. 200 dog rescues just in Oakland County, Michigan, that were registered last year. Can there be too many? Do they facilitate part of the problem?
I think all those voices are a testament to how much we love animals, and the increasing number of rescue groups and the increasing number of organizations that are founded for animal protection. All of that is a sign of this great, a cultural reflection of this great love affair that we have with animals, and I see it as nothing but positive. And I think that the more voices that bring to bear on the issue, the better off the animals are, and the more progress we'll make. I'm not a person who believes that everybody has to be focused on what I'm focused on in animal welfare and animal rights, or that there isn't a big enough tent that we can't welcome all the different people doing all the different wonderful things to help animals. In fact, I would argue that it's been because of the increasing number and diversity of voices that we in the No Kill movement have become so successful. You know, historically, we have deferred to the large national organizations. You know, we were content to write them checks and look the other way because the experts were in charge, and we left it to them to fix the problem. And in fact, they failed miserably, literally beyond platitudes about the human-animal bond and an annual calendar during the holidays with cute pictures of puppies and kittens. We've not demanded anything in return. And when we decided that we were going to solve this particular problem, you know, we wanted to end the killing of animals in shelters, and we went to them as the experts. They told us it was impossible. They told us it couldn't be done. They told us it shouldn't be done, that it was a bad idea. And so we decided to do it ourselves, and we are now incredibly successful. It's the grassroots that's defining the agenda of this movement, and not what it used to be, which is a top-heavy movement that was intolerant of dissent and that was prone to censorship. And you know, if it wasn't for this explosion in the number of groups and the number of voices, you know, feral cats would still be killed in shelters en masse. There would be no foster care because the large national groups opposed it. Shelters wouldn't be partnering with rescue groups because it was still the official policy of the Humane Society of the United States as late as 1990 that shelters shouldn't work with rescue groups. And where they refused to do it, we did it ourselves. So the more groups, the merrier, because, you know, while we are right now the most progressive voice in animal welfare when it comes to animals in shelters. You know, the more successful we are, the more innovative we are, the more obvious the gaps in the safety net that even we've created will become. And you know, I think the next generation will push us even probably past our own comfort points. And the way we call the prior generation that relied on you know, adopt a few, kill the rest mentality, the way we look at them as dinosaurs, I think the next generation is going to push us, you know, above and beyond what even we can see as possible, and we'll be the dinosaurs to them. And actually, I'm looking forward to being called that by a generation that doesn't accept even the things that we accept. And we're starting to see the seeds of that now. You know, right now, the goal of the No Kill movement is to save all those animals who come into shelters who are either healthy or, sick, injured, unweaned, or traumatized, but treatable. And, the good news is that amounts to 95, 96, 97, even 98% of all the animals. So there is a small percentage, and thankfully it's very small, 2 to 5% of animals who do come into shelters who are beyond our ability to medically save, who are truly aggressive dogs with a poor prognosis for rehabilitation at that time in history. And the tragic thing that is that many of those, most of those, in some cases all of those are killed. But that doesn't mean their killing is, even though they are hopelessly ill or truly vicious, it doesn't mean their killing isn't ethically problematic. And there is a new breed of animal rescuer who argues that even that killing is unethical, and they are bringing new principles into the no-kill movement, like hospice, palliative care, because even though some of those animals are hopelessly ill, they're not suffering, and they can live a good quality of life, at least for a time. And they're arguing through hospice care those animals can and should be saved, and there are advocates for even aggressive dogs that want to see the sanctuary movement dovetail with the no-kill movement and find a place where those animals can live full, rich, and happy lives, where they can't harm humans or other animals, because even though it's not good policy for an urban animal shelter to adopt out a truly vicious dog, the reality is we're killing them for our convenience, not because they're suffering. And I think as those voices increase in number and become more paramount and show us what we can and should be, I think in generations to come, we're going to become a no-kill nation in the absolute purest sense of the word. And I look forward to those debates, and I look forward to those days.
It's very interesting to hear your self-awareness of your own evolutionary arc. I think that's very rare that people kind of see or even hope, to. I think everybody wants to leave a legacy that they created something absolutely genius. They want it to be the same forever and ever and ever and ever. And I just find it fascinating. To me, that's true evolution, and evolution, I think, is pretty damn messy.
I'll tell you, there is going to come a day, I don't know that I'll even be remembered long after I, lay my head down on the pillow for the very last time, but if I am, there will come a day where somebody calls me a dinosaur, and that'll be a great day, because it'll mean that animals that even we were, putting to death, even though we did it we did it for reasons that we called merciful. We did it because we thought we were meeting the dictionary definition of euthanasia. Definitions change, and there is an evolution of I subscribe to the belief that that the great abolitionists and civil rights advocates used to say that the arc of history is wide, but it bends towards greater justice and compassion, and our definitions will change, and compassion must be embraced in whatever forms it's presented to us, including forms that we can't see, stuck as we are with the limitations of our own time and our own worldview and our own cultural understandings. That it must be embraced, especially when it gives meaning to an animal's inherent right to live.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for just a small moment break. We're getting near the end.
Okay.
It's good stuff, though. I'll make one quick adjustment and lose this battery. We've got a really great soundtrack going for
You don't like elevator music?
Oh, we're gonna have to adjust in post. We'll fix it in post. This is a new added attraction for me. This new sound, these DSLRs is just fabulous. But I haven't had enough time on the system to know myself. Let's see. Alright, let's do that. That looks pretty good. Alright. Why don't you talk about, it's my understanding to some degree what you've kind of put together is almost like a 12-step program. Here's how we do it, and it goes through these stages. Walk me through the process of the no-kill. You know, when you first engage an organization, what are the steps you walk them through to make the adjustment, the change?
Okay, well, since the 19th century, the solution to the animals entering shelters has been the same, that you adopt some and then you kill the rest. And what we have done is created a program that I like to call the no-kill equation. It is a series of programs and services that respond to the individual needs of the different kinds of animals, or the animals facing different issues in shelters. So for example, some animals entering shelters are underage, motherless, neonatal kittens and puppies. And at a traditional shelter, they'd be killed. At a no-kill shelter, you respond with a program designed to take care of the particular issue that they need. What they need is round-the-clock supplemental bottle feeding. So we created a foster care program so that the animals can be cared for by by volunteers, and can be provided the round-the-clock care they need till they're old enough to eat on their own and old enough to be adopted. Some animals entering shelters are scared dogs, and again, at a traditional shelter, the answer was to kill them. At a no-kill shelter, we've created behavior rehabilitation programs to get them to learn to trust humans and to see that humans are actually capable of great love and great joy and good things for dogs. And once we help them come out of their shell, we find them a loving new home. Some animals come in sick or injured, and we've created a very specific set of programs to deal with their issues, which is medical care and medical rehabilitation. And so rather than have a single approach that says these animals will find homes for, these will kill, we've created a series of 10 programs that provide a life-affirming alternative to killing that gets animals ready for life as cherished companions. And then we kick off our comprehensive marketing and adoption program to get those animals into loving new homes. And it has been wildly successful. You know, as I said earlier, that approach has created no-kill communities, not just across the U.S. and communities of every demographic, but across the world. We now have no-kill communities in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, which follow that model. So it's been shown to work in all communities, and I believe that it will work in every community if shelter directors are willing to put it into place comprehensively and with integrity. You know, in most communities, shelter directors follow a model of sheltering that was developed in the 19th century. And since the 19th century, we have been killing animals. And it's become a cliche, but really the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And since the approach that they advocate hasn't worked, it's time to try a new approach. Even if they're not convinced of its potential, it will still save, even if they're not convinced that they can cross the goal line and achieve no-kill, they'll still be doing better than they're doing now. They'll still save hundreds, if not thousands, of animals that they would otherwise kill, and that will make, hundreds and thousands of animals pretty happy, and it will make hundreds and thousands of animal lovers pretty happy. And it's worth doing, and it's worth doing today.
Okay. Let's talk about what's next. What do you have a master plan? What's taking place with your organization? What's the next step? 6 months out, a year out, 5 years out, 10 years out?
What we advocate is nothing less than a revolution in sheltering. And if the revolution is going to succeed, it has to be bigger than it's the people who are advocating for it. And my entire goal has been to not to do things for shelters, not to do things for the community, not to be the person that people talk about or talk to, but to empower local citizens to be the change agents in their community. So that I want to be a person that I want there to be no-kill movements and no-kill efforts and no-kill success in communities across the country where people say, who's Nathan Winograd, where they don't know who I am because the movement has become so much bigger than me. And I think we're succeeding. And, so my goal in the coming months and the coming years is to make myself fade into obscurity, so that there are lots of new voices and lots of successes that aren't attributable to me, so that no matter what happens, that if I get hit by the proverbial bus, if somebody uncovers these great skeletons in my closet, which I don't think exist, but nonetheless, that the movement will continue to grow and continue to prosper. And in fact, that's the only way a movement will succeed, where it's not based on the personality of the people who advocate for it, but it becomes a deeply held ethic in the community and across the country. And I think we're succeeding at that. There are so many different voices in the no-kill movement today. And what is the most exciting thing for me, and actually it sort of came home with a community here in Michigan. I got a letter from a shelter director from the shelter in Marquette, Michigan, and they had been no-kill for 3 years. It was like the best kept secret in the no-kill movement. And now we're finding out that there are all these, they all got there using the same model, and but there are all these communities out there that we're finding out about all the time that have become no-kill and have been no-kill for a number of years. And that's, that tells me the movement is bigger than all of us. And it's one of those things where, if I can borrow, an animal pun, the cat is quite literally out of the bag, and no matter what any of us say, do, or what happens to any of us, the cat is never going back in, and that is so incredibly exciting.
Interesting. I mentioned the conference that I was at last week, and one of the things I kept hearing from those that operate rescues or other types of animal organizations in other parts of the world, they could never really understand the U.S. shelter system. They've never looked at it as a model of this is what you should do. Is that your experience? Is that what you've heard from other parts of the world?
I have. I don't speak to it because I've not been to those countries. I've not visited those shelters. I don't know how much of it is real, how much of it is rigorous. If you talk to your average person on the street, I think you'll find how shockingly few people know that their local humane society or local SPCA actually kills animals. So, I know that there are some communities, some countries where you hear that, shelters don't kill animals. And I think, if nothing else, that shows us how we are trapped in our own cultural belief systems, how we are trapped in the confines of our own time and our own experiences. And so that rather than looking at things as, well, that's not the way we do things, or something's impossible, or it's never been done before, if you look at all those great social movements in history, and I believe that ours is an extension and is as noble and just as those that have come before, that the greats in history are people who have been able to see beyond the limitations of their own, culture and space and time, and particular historical epoch. And while I don't begin to pretend that I'm one of those people, I think I aspire to that, and I think we all should aspire to that, to try to see, to try to check our traditional thinking and really ask ourselves whether we have beliefs because it's what we truly believe, or because it's what we've been taught, and it's what we believe our experiences reflect. And I think those who don't look at things as too radical or too impossible to at least try, I think those are the ones that end up being the most successful. And I think that's been a large part of our success in the no-kill movement.
Excellent.
Just so you know, I've got to be somewhere at noon, so we sort of...
5 minutes.
Okay.
We've been doing good, and I appreciate
Good. Sure. Happy to. Happy to.
It's been very good.
Happy to.
As a matter of fact, I'd hopefully, we can catch up on the road sometime, and I can do a follow-up. I'm sure there's going to be a few follow-up things. So, what is your objective? You're speaking at this no-kill conference here in Michigan. What is your presentation going to be? A couple other questions along those lines. How many books have you sold? How many books have you written? And I'm curious what kind of fee that you get for this, and where does that fee go?
Okay, so I don't get paid to do these speaking engagements. I don't charge a fee, and I do it because I love to do it, and I want to see more animals saved. I have written 4 books. My first book, Redemption, which sort of sparked this revolution. Although it had been going on beforehand, it really took it to a new level. I mean, it really made no-kill, really cemented the no-kill idea into the consciousness of the animal welfare community like never before, and I'm really proud of that fact. We have put 100,000 copies of Redemption into the hands of animal lovers all over the world. I wrote a follow-up to Redemption, which is called Irreconcilable Differences, which takes off where Redemption left off. I have a new book coming out next month called Friendly Fire, which is about how the large organizations which we trusted to do the job actually failed to do the job, and how the grassroots of the movement is finally waking up and saying, if we're going to succeed, we have to do it ourselves. And in fact, that's exactly what we've done. And I also have a vegan cookbook that I co-wrote with my wife. In fact, Friendly Fire is also co-written with my wife. But the presentation I gave at this Michigan No-Kill conference was called Imagine Greatness, and it literally focused on throwing away the constraints of how we've always done things and being willing to take risks, because it is those leaders, those shelter directors who not just thought outside the box, but threw the box away and said, if I'm going to save lives that we have historically ended in years past, I've got to approach things from an entirely new line of thinking. And it's those shelter directors who have been willing to do that, who have never been willing to throw up their hands and say, if we can't do this one thing, which is kill them, there's nothing we can do. The ones that refuse to think along those lines are the ones that have been incredibly successful, and my hope is to get shelter directors across the state of Michigan to thinking along the same lines.
Okay, how does this potentially affect stray dogs? And because this for us as an organization, World Animal Awareness Society, this what we're doing, you and I, feeds into our American Strays program, where we're trying to get an understanding and really measure how many animals are out there strays, whether they're community strays, feral strays, whether they're people let them go. But how do your programs kind of connect or address strays? Or
well, I mean, one of the things is, I'm not an advocate for just releasing an animal on the street. Obviously, the thought of that happening is awful. But I think one of the problems is that, and I'm not justifying it all, but there are people out there who know that their shelter kills animals, and if they take an animal to the shelter, that animal's going to be killed. So they'll see a stray stray animal, and rather than bring the animal to a shelter where the animal will get a home, they think to themselves, at least he's got a shot on the street, and so they might look the other way. And I think the more that communities become, the community animal shelters become shelter in the truest sense of the word, and the more people know that if they see an animal, a stray animal, and they bring that animal to the shelter will get a loving new home and not a lethal injection and a body bag. I think you'll see more people willing to take responsibility for stray animals and willing to get them off the streets and into shelters and then onto loving new homes.
Excellent. What would you like to share that I haven't asked, and then I've got one other thing.
Okay. I think that as much as this will sound like a trite cliche, I think it's been a large part of our success, and I hope people take it to heart. But if nothing else, if people just, if they believe in their dreams, and if they hold on to their principles, and if they believe that, if they never stop believing that through hard work and perseverance they'll succeed, they will succeed, and we will create, collectively, all of us doing that, we will create a nation where animal shelters are what they have always been meant to be, and what they should be, and what not just the animal lovers in the community deserve, but what is the animal's birthright. We will become a no-kill nation. At the end of redemption, I say that we're the generation that questioned the killing. We are the generation that figured out how to stop it, and I ask the question, will we be the generation that does? And I believe we will be. That, to quote the great Nelson Mandela, that, sometimes history calls upon a generation to be great, and we can be that great generation.
Excellent. I really appreciate your time, but before you go, I'm going to ask you what I ask everybody to do, and that is to look in the camera. I want you to tell me your full name, what you do, and say you're watching the World Animal Awareness Society.
I am Nathan Winograd. I am the executive director of the No Kill Advocacy Center. I spend my days and nights trying to end the killing of animals in shelters, and you are watching the World Animal Awareness Society.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time. I am going to ask